everyone, it's Dr. Gina Joe, or Dr. Gina Jefferson, Professor of Otolaryngology, Head and Neck Surgery. And today I have with me an esteemed person that has helped pave the way for people that look like me in the specialty of otolaryngology, Dr. Marie Brown-Wagner. Why Dr. Brown-Wagner is so important to us is she is the first African-American female board certified in our amazing specialty. So I'm going to pick her brain today to learn more about her experiences, and what she hopes for the future of our specialty. Welcome, Dr. Brown-Wagner.
Well, thank you for meeting me.
Oh my gosh. As I was telling you before we actually began the recording, it's been a lot trying to just identify who came before us from the female African-American perspective. So I'm happy that we finally made progress and have the opportunity to meet and share your story.
Okay.
So let's begin from the beginning. Where were you born and raised?
Monongahela, Pennsylvania is southwest of Pittsburgh, about an hour, southwest.
Okay, so what were kind of your growing up experiences, if those were the experiences that led you to pursue a career in medicine?
Well, it was a combination. One, it was a very small town. It was sort of a steel mill, coal mill, mining town, bedroom kind of community for that area. And we have several members in our family who were deaf. And, you know, it was the old stigma of that they couldn't talk, you know, they couldn't learn. But then all of a sudden, you know, a family member on the north side of Pittsburgh, which seemed to be more progressive, realized that they were deaf and could see the experiences that that cousin was having, sort of a second cousin, my mother's first cousin level. And with education and with medical involvement, this person could move ahead and, you know, not have that old deaf and dumb statement. And so it became in our family sort of speak up for those who can't speak for themselves. Sort of the theory behind that was obviously for anybody who had a hearing loss and couldn't talk. But with my grandfather and my own parents, it became more, okay, you have these benefits. We're going to encourage you or support you. And so then it became for anyone who, anyone, whether it was someone of color. Our own town only had about 25 blacks.
Wow.
There was a lot of prejudice and discrimination. I just learned to swim 3 years ago, and I'm 72 now, but the pools were segregated when I grew up. So that didn't happen. And I was just, and I can't tell you why or how. I either thought that I was going to be involved with teaching deaf people or being in medicine and treating anyone but kids, or even maybe a vet, being, you know, and treating animals. So I would say that I'm going to be a doctor, and I have to say, people, you didn't say that to too many, because it was, she has these silly ideas, whether it was teachers, some of my own family members. But I have to say, never my grandparents and never my parents. So it's like, okay, well, keep studying and we're going to try hard to get you there.
Right. So with the family members who were deaf or had hearing loss, were there any interactions that you actually had with an otolaryngologist as a child to even know about the specialty?
Never knew anything about the specialty. It was just about working to improve them, and that they could have language, but it was sign language and not verbal.
Right.
So I had no idea about the field.
Okay, that's the case for so many of us still today, because it's not even a required rotation or experience in most medical school programs. When did you figure out that otolaryngology was what you wanted to pursue?
It was really in medical school. I was at Tufts, and Tufts was one of the few schools in those days, 72, that had sort of a very clinical, holistic approach. So a lot of the clinicians would teach as part of the basic sciences. And so when we were doing neurology, head and neck, it was the anatomy. They would be in the lab with us.
Mm-hmm.
And it would be obviously the pathology, physiology, but then they would have the clinical aspect. And that's when the neurosurgeons would come in and teach, again, the anatomy and the clinical aspects, but then the otolaryngologists, in those days, it was just otolaryngology, and then moved on to otolaryngology, head and neck, but then saw the full scope. And this was still the most interesting part for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thought at that point was, okay, I think I'm going to go into this, but oh man, surgery is so early in the morning. That was the only thought. I never even thought about the female part, because whether it's undergrad, because I went to a women's college, Mount Holyoke, or Tufts, it was, if you get through, you're going to be prepared. And so I never really thought of the female part until, and certainly as an African American female, never thought about that. It wasn't until I was doing interviews for residencies that I would meet some resistance. I chose Mount Holyoke because it had the best success rate for PhDs or women in science, and I wasn't going to compete against men. I was just going to have that support from the undergraduate experience and the preparation.
So once you got to medical school, during medical school, did you have any identified mentors or someone that was supportive of your desire to pursue a competitive surgical subspecialty?
Um, I'm going to say, well, Vivian Penn was our dean,
Okay.
and so she was supportive too, that we succeeded and did well. I can't say for surgery because she's a nephrologist and she was our dean. But then the two, Dr. Chasen was the chairman, and Dr. Carmody, who was from, I believe, the British West Indies, and African American. And so they were, yes, they were just supportive. And I would say they were my mentors about how I should approach it.
Mm-hmm.
And not to do 1 year of surgery, do 2 years of surgery. So they were my guides.
And did you remain in contact with them once you finished your training?
I did. I
Okay.
did.
I think I've heard of Dr. Carmody.
Yes, yes. He was primarily head and neck, but an amazing teacher.
Okay.
Yes, just an amazing teacher. Dr. Chasen too, he was an ear surgeon.
Okay.
He was chairman of the department.
So in residency, were there any specific barriers or challenges that you faced that were because you were female or because you were African American?
Both. But I have to say, no one was really terrible.
Okay.
In the point of sabotage or there was a lot of negativity, but you find out later that they had bets against you, that you wouldn't make it or wouldn't do things. And as I said, I was in general surgery for 2 years. So one of the first things when I called, and I was on the chairman's service, and I think these were the ways to kind of sort us out, day one, out of medical school. So there were 68 surgical residents, interns, residents, and I was the only female. I was also the only African American in the program.
You
And there were
the
two
only
other,
female out of all those people.
yes, right. And there were only two other African-American residents, Noah Harris and his wife, Barbara Abercrombie, and they were in the medicine side. So one, there was no, I'm just reading Ruth Bader Ginsburg's book, but she didn't have a bathroom, I didn't have a bathroom. So I would have 10 minutes, put up on the, on the bathroom and just, woman in the bathroom. And I had 10 minutes and then they were coming in. So I learned you get everything, I call it the surgical shower, in and out. But the first time that I was on call and I called one of the top other surgeons other than the chairman to give this, this presentation, and we had to go to the OR, and he hung up on me. He said, "Don't call me, call my resident," and hung up. And it's like, well, the chief resident or whatever was already in the OR, so this was left to me. So I called again, dialed very quickly, and said, "Dr. Glotzer, I'm Marie Brown-Wagner, and at that point, Marie Brown, I am your resident." And the other chief, he yelled, "Where's my chief?" And I said, "Well, he's already scrubbed. It's a long case." So we eventually became very good friends because, not good friends, but he knew that I was conscientious. He was also head of the, New York, or at least the Bronx, the fire department surgeon. So he would make his rounds at 2 a.m, and I was always up going over numbers, going over x-rays, going over everything to be prepared the next morning. So when he saw that I would do that, then he started calling me more and more to be involved with his cases. The other thing,
from the person that was afraid of the early morning.
that's right. Oh yeah, right. So you just, I'm just catching up my sleep now that I'm retiring. But the other thing was I made two other things. One, they always made rounds in the men's locker room. Yes. And so I have a dear friend or student, or Julie Way, who's in ENT, and I was telling that story, and then later on she told me, "I can't believe it, they're still doing that." But anyhow, this was the day that they would make rounds, and so I would miss out on pearls, tips, what to think about. And so I really give credit to, I had so much support from an orderly in the OR who was African American, the head of X-ray tech, who also had some skills to be a radiologist, but coming from the islands to the United States, he was now head of radiology techs at Montefiore, and not really practicing, but he would be in there with the scans, where they weren't even doing they were just starting scans, x-rays, and then tell me, and then I would review things to see what had gone on. So I really had support from so many people, but they weren't necessarily other docs or, my mentor was an orderly, Chris, and they called him Big Al, but Al, who was the radiology tech. So these were people who supported me through those first several years of general surgery. And another time, a good diagnosis, and I don't know, I'm coming back to the ER, and someone said, "Oh, I heard about the diagnosis." And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, don't get smug. Everybody's watching. They know when you do something really well, and they're going to know when you do something bad. So just be ready and realize that everybody's watching. You're the only female and the only Black person here." And I have to say, that little nubbin of, call it what you will, warning, wisdom, who knows, discriminatory statement, but that has just stood with me. So everybody's watching.
So Is there any particular experience that you had during training that was most impactful in a positive way?
Um, well, you could take some of those experiences, and I've just been thinking about this because, of COVID, and I've had all this time to think about what has gone on and what diagnoses I've made or major surgeries. And I think some of those negative experiences I didn't really look at as negative in those times. I
Mhm.
think now I'd probably be, I don't know if I'd be in medicine because I'd probably be joining the Black Panther movement or some other things to just get out there and protest more. But I looked at those as sometimes they would be hurtful, but I just got used to taking the high road, as my family would say, and turning them around. So that made me more watchful, more appreciative of the people who are working with me and supportive of me, and not focusing on the negative people, because just realizing and hearing that some people are making bets that you're not going to make it. So that made me more determined.
Mhm.
So that's the other side of the coin of some of those negative ones. They
Right,
made me more positive. I think down the road it had its toll because I started, many years
right,
um,
right.
feeling stressed or burned out, or it's like I'm tired of people always taking bets on me. Um, but you don't give up.
That's right. Any specific obstacles you experienced in your career path towards promotion to a position that you wanted?
um, yes, in um, I would say in promotions, not from the initial uh, people that supported me or hired me, whether it was the chairman of my program or Dr. Rabuzzi when they started the new program at New York Medical College. Um, all those people were just very supportive. I started, well, it was along the line when Dr. Rabuzzi left and another chairman came in. Um, very, that's when I really felt obvious discrimination, and it was obvious in terms of if we were doing a paper, and I'm more a clinical person. I wasn't a research person, but we would work with residents. Um, he would, yeah, be very negative about my approach, um, very negative about. But if we did something, he wanted his name on the paper. Um, just very negative about who I would use to collaborate with. I mean, he was seated down at New York Pioneer, and I was up at director up at Westchester Medical Center. So my support team there was the head of neurosurgery, head of cardiothoracic, and the head of general surgery, because these are the people who initially supported me for 12 years.
Right.
Um, so that that was starting to really, that's where it started taking its toll on me because yeah, I would feel very frustrated, and then you start doubting yourself um, about really what your skills are.
Yeah.
And I had always, and I still believe in this, collaborating on difficult cases and talking about things ahead of time.
Right.
So, and neurosurgery was used to that. And it's like, when you have the case, we'll stand by. And in turn, we've got this, we're doing an anterior approach, patients had radiation or whatever, scar tissue, will you be there? So that was always good. This, right. It became difficult for me to just constantly be stressed
Hmm.
because my chairman didn't agree that I would talk to these other people who would be support. Or a difficult case that I would call Dr. Cotton about. A little girl fell through a fire escape. It was all rusted and whatever. So I was just struggling. And he had a situation, I mean, not situation, his policy was, okay, if he accepted the patient, um, we could go out and operate or assist and see what he's doing and then how to manage his post-op. And this is, we were still covering in the Bronx. So I would do that. But my own chairman, who this newer one,
Mhm.
would very, very critical, you know, why are you going there? We could do it down here. New York, I don't think so. But anyhow, it was just a battle, and I never really had that early on.
Mhm.
People would make bets, but um, they would be there. And now it was like a constant push. So yes, and it was the same time when Linda Brodsky was also dealing with her issues at Buffalo Children's.
Mhm.
And I think, one of your questions, how can the academy be more involved? I mean, there's certain chairmen or professors that are really, I don't know, very misogynistic. I mean, very um, bigoted, and yes, I would. That bothered me, and that's when I started pulling away. I mean, I'd always taught residents, and I still did, and students, and mentor kids from Bronx and North Harlem. And we had a program on Saturdays that, if they were interested. And I did that the same when I was on the reservation for, again, people interested in sciences and the health science. But when I was in New York, and then I felt like, oh, how can I be positive? How can I be a mentor and continue with this? Because I just feel like it's such a struggle. So when people are against you or your own chairman, your people of influence, it starts to whittle you down, and you start second guessing,
Yeah,
yourself. So
you're right. So I think that is what contributes to imposter syndrome, right? Like you,
right,
so you're confident, but then someone belittles you in some way, and it just makes you second guess yourself, as you said. I feel it's so sad. The one of the most wonderful things about our specialty is that our interaction and collaboration with others. It's a shame that someone would make you feel that this is terrible that you're doing that. That's what
right.
makes it so much fun.
That's exactly right. And that's why I really loved our field. So out of whatever the 30 year, well, I don't know, um, from 82 to now, 82 was when I was boarded to now. I've really enjoyed my field, and I've really enjoyed the specialty, um, maybe minus a year, but there's a little pieces here and there, you know. And the biggest part was that 9 months in New York. And actually, the dean was very good. And we had talked about me doing a sabbatical. And that's when he wouldn't give me permission. So
Oh,
this was my academic career, which is like, I mean, then I could just speak up. It's like, I'm not a Nobel Prize winner, and neither are you. So the dean gave me the permission for the sabbatical.
mhm.
Uh, when I went to Shiprock
Okay.
on the reservation. And rather than staying a year, I stayed 10 years
Oh my
because
gosh.
there was a lot to do.
So I want to hear all about that. How long were you in New York?
I was in New York 21 years.
Okay. So that was a long career there.
It was. And as I said, I really enjoyed everything till about the last 6 months of of the time. And it became necessary to me to get myself back.
Okay. So you enjoyed teaching. What was the most enjoyable thing about interacting with the residents or the people that were they high school students that you were working with on the weekend?
For high school, I had 3 levels: high school students, medical students, and and residents. And so then I became the pediatric liaison when I stepped down as director.
Okay.
Didn't want to deal with this particular chairman.
Hmm.
Um, anymore. And yeah, and so working with pediatricians, because so much of ENT is that, I would still continue working with general surgery, cardiac, and the pulmonary. But yeah, I enjoy. I think it's really for me about teaching. It was to teach ENT or otolaryngology, head and neck surgery, but again, it was about the collaboration, and I would find out what, not the high school students, but the medical students, what their interest was. If they're going into pediatrics, this is kind of what you need to know. This is what it is about surgery for our kids, and the anesthesia and the post-op. If they were interested in family medicine, if they were interested in general surgery, so then a surgeon, might not want to know about a tonsil, but then they might have a tonsillar bleed
Yep.
and they're in a remote area, and guess what? Anesthesia and general surgery are the only ones dealing with this. So, one guy, wrote back to me and said, "Hey, I'm glad you taught me about that." We also rotated. I started with oral surgeons to rotate with us, because so much of us are head and neck. If you're working with kids and they're, the development of the mandible and the maxilla, kids with cleft palate. So I like that interdisciplinary. And so I would find out their interests. If they had no interest, okay, straightforward, here we go. This is ENT. And my philosophy about listening to the families, listening to the patient, and then, coming up with a plan. So
So important. It's so funny because I was talking to someone the other day. It's like I mentor a lot of people, and a lot of them don't actually go into otolaryngology.
right, right.
But it's so important nonetheless, just so that they know important principles of how you evaluate, assess, and make a plan for a patient, no matter what you go into.
That's exactly right. And, we had a rheumatology down the hall. So sometimes rheumatology fellows would come through ENT, because guess what? And then I learned more about rheumatology and our field. So it's really interesting, I think, to have that collaboration. So I really, and even when now I'm working with students from Burrell, it's a DO school in
Okay.
Las Cruces, New Mexico. And again, they have a different, I don't know, sort of, I won't say philosophy, but it's again what I'm going to teach them from my aspect
Mm-hmm.
of as an MD, and then learning a little bit about what they do, but again, teaching them in terms of surgery, and again, the whole manner of how we collaborate with the other physician. I mean, for us, and certainly in surgery, the anesthesiologist is my right-hand person. So again, learn how we work in the OR together.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So tell me about the reservation. You sounded so excited.
Well, I am, because it's still special to me. And if they weren't on lockdown or doing surgery, I'd go back to help or volunteer. So I went there for a year because Navajo, I was at Shiprock, Northern Navajo Medical Center. The Navajo Native Americans are like people from the Alaskan Native American, as well as Mongolia. They have a lot of ear disease, chronic ear disease.
Okay.
Some of the charts you would see, some of the old house people, Jack Pollock, De La Cruz. I mean, you would see these charts, and these people are chronic ear disease. I mean, this is like another ear fellowship in a sense.
Oh my goodness.
And so that's why I went, and their language development, because they were also the code talkers. So they have this in World War II. So they have this interesting code and language that the rest of Americans have, couldn't crack. So I went there for that reason, and indeed, the chronic ear disease is extensive,
Mhm.
from kids up. At the same time, I started seeing, so I knew the first year was going to be difficult. How should I say it? Short, when I was debating, am I going to go back to New York? That guy's still there. He eventually was fired, just to let you know. So I'm not mentioning names, but yeah, right. Yes, I didn't, right. Where there's one, there are going to be others. And so I told the dean that. And so she found,
Oh, goodness.
But the in a number of the Native Americans are suspicious of the regular MDs or medical docs, just as many African Americans are, in terms of how they've been treated in the past.
Mhm.
We have our Tuskegee Airmen issues. Well, there they have their uranium issues.
Okay.
So there are still uranium tailings. There's still mines that are open. But up as late as 1963, women were cooking in the water, draining down from the uranium.
Oh.
The kids would sleep with what they call yellow cake. Now this isn't in the textbooks. This is what you find out as you're talking to your or listening to your patient. And yellow cake would glow.
Yes.
They would put it under their pillows, like little kids.
Yes.
And so, and then when I went out there, 2001, shortly after 9/11, though I made the plans before 9/11. But so here we are dealing with all these people with cancer, nasopharyngeal cancer,
Mm.
stomach cancer, kidney cancer, lymphomas,
Yeah.
and thyroid cancer.
Yeah.
So I started a cancer support group, and then the general surgeon said, "Marie, would you include my other patients?" He had stomach cancer. So anyhow, so then we decided to get. They had no tumor board, so I started a tumor with this guy, Jim Power, who's a general surgeon. So we got people from the Brigham, and there was someone also in Farmington. Do you need to get that? Oh.
Yep.
And we started a tumor board, and they would come once a month, and then we started presenting cases. So there was just a lot to do there. And I found myself staying, and sometimes a couple of people had said, "Are you going to practice on us?"
Oh.
I thought it was just so hurtful that they would feel that way.
Yeah.
What I said was, well, I practiced on the New Yorkers for 20 years, so I think I've got it down now. I hope so.
Oh.
I didn't know what to say to
Yeah.
that. But some of the people would then start coming back to say, "Oh, yes, please take care of us and don't leave." And I found myself saying, "Yeah, I don't want to leave." I found that I could do a lot more there than
Mhm.
being a fourth opinion or a fifth opinion in New York,
Yeah.
and being there. And both of my girls were in college at that point, so I didn't go back.
Oh my goodness.
So I stayed there for 10 years.
That sounds so rewarding.
Oh, it is. It was, and it is. And I would go back to help out. But as I said, right now they're still in lockdown. Their numbers are just starting to come down.
Mhm, mhm. Wow. Oh goodness.
So
So,
there were ear or thyroid
wow,
primary.
it is great that somebody loves the ear that much.
Well, it became so many ear surgeries that it's like, okay, ear there and maybe tonsils in Albuquerque is like, oh my gosh, I really like, this is why I like the diverse aspects of it. And in New York, I was trauma, thyroid, and bronchoscopies because we had a burn unit. So that's why I have enjoyed the full spectrum in
Mhm.
many different locations of my specialty.
You have indeed. I can put a tube in an ear. I'm a head and neck surgeon, so I can do an auriculectomy really well. Oh my goodness, that's amazing. Um, so thinking kind of futuristically, you've been an otolaryngologist for some time. Obviously, you've seen changes with respect to numbers of women in our specialty. Are there any, I'm sorry, I have something in my eye. Are there any changes that you would like to see in our specialty, just globally, or just anything that you would want to improve?
I think in the United States, well, let's talk about global because I did go on a number of missions, kind of once a year or twice a year.
Oh, cool.
Either
Where did you go?
I would go with Heal the Children and Smile Train to South America, and that
Okay.
was Colombia mostly, um, but also Peru and Honduras, and well, I guess that's it. It seems like there's someplace. Oh, Ecuador.
Okay.
And Peru, we were teaching. Colombia and Ecuador, we were working.
Offering. Okay.
And then, kind of sort of, I think, being open. Then all of a sudden, I got a call from it's the Center for Global Health. It was out of Denver
Okay.
and through Colorado. And so then I went to Rwanda.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that was the best. I mean, they were all the best in different ways, but we were teaching at the medical school for a month, and
Oh.
for subspecialists or specialists, and we went there to teach. Family medicine has a department there from Denver, but then they brought us in to teach, and that was absolutely, for me, that was the best.
That is
Uh,
so amazing.
I went to Ghana too, and that was different. That was looking at an ICU with an anesthesiologist and intensivist, and how to build this for a gold mining company, and how to support their workers.
Okay.
Um, and so that was an interesting kind of aspect, and then you're still seeing patients and teaching. But Rwanda was I would go back there, in a heartbeat.
Wow. That
Yeah.
sounds exciting. I've been to Kenya and I'm going again in April,
Oh,
and
good.
it's mostly head and neck.
Right, right.
You were probably doing a lot of ears, I imagine, in South America. What were you doing in South America?
Um, from somewhere 2000 to 2000, and this is 21, 18. I sort
Mhm.
of stopped because the last 3 years my kids have been having babies. So I needed to be here. I promised them. They were in a lot of OR break rooms, waiting rooms, ER waiting rooms. So I promised them, when you need me, I will be there. So I haven't gone anywhere for 3 years, and now COVID hit. But yeah, I'm dying to go back. But yeah, so I did a couple of thyroids when I was in Rwanda,
Okay.
but they have these huge goiters. It's completely different than our Chernobyl and our Navajo guys
Exactly.
with their cancers. These are you know
Enormous
me-
goiter.
right. So yeah, you're the real head and neck person. I'm the other minor head and neck person.
That's not
Um,
minor.
but yeah, so I really would like to go back again. But again, I'm older, so the longer cases, aren't as good for me. um, I'm better on the assisting side or making it short. I have to
Oh
make
my
these short.
gosh. But the teaching still is so important.
Yes, no, that I can do. I figure for a long time, and
Yeah.
so I hope so.
Oh, and by the way, no one would ever guess your age.
My parents were young, and my dad was he's a policeman, did dispatch till he was 80, volunteered. He would do dispatch, and then if he didn't like how things were going, he'd end up going out in the field and such.
Oh my goodness.
So Yeah. So I don't know. So hopefully I can teach or be involved with something.
Yeah, that's amazing. Looking back on your career or just all of your experiences.
Yeah, no, so getting back to that, I would like more when I go to these, I'm the only person of color usually,
Uh-huh.
whether South America or Africa. And I don't think it's lack of interest. I think it's really it takes money,
Yeah.
it takes time.
Time.
I think in that sense, somehow when you ask what I would like more scholarships or fellowships or support for people of color
Mm-hmm.
to go on these missions because I think it's so important. I think it's important here in the United States, and people say, "Why are you going elsewhere when we've got need here?" But how should I say it? We're always happy when we see someone that's, hey, that person looks like us.
Yep.
And I don't care whether it's Africa or South America. No, I don't. Well, I'm sort of Spanglish. It's Bronx Spanish, you know. But it's nice that there are others.
Yep.
You know, we're in there in medicine too, so it's nice to be out there. So somehow, I would like to, you know, I won't say sponsor that, but to really push for that
Yeah.
outside the country. And when you mentioned globally, and then I think here again, we get caught up in our practices, we get caught up. It's fine in the teaching institutions, but there are a lot of institutions that, and docs, that it's so important, I think, to mentor kids along the way, for women to women, women to men, but also people of color to and I know it takes time, but it's so rewarding
Mm-hmm.
because like I said, it really kept me going in down moments that because this really is a field that I enjoy and I've enjoyed what I've done. I mean, that's why retirement is like, okay. I mean, some people just look to retire. I'm just looking to do it differently. So, um, anyhow.
You're not slowing down. You just named a bunch of things you're doing. Anything you would tell your 18-year-old self now that you didn't know back then?
Yes. And I thought about that because you asked that question. But I've been thinking about it. I think it's really one to trust your inner instincts. You know, if something really doesn't sit well, just kind of try to figure out what that is. Is it because it's really going against your grain?
Mm-hmm.
Um, um, or even if it's a case, just to try to see what's going on. I operated on a kid here that something wasn't right, and I couldn't figure out what it was. It was beyond um, the bronchoscopy and getting her, you're not doing a trach and getting her off the vent. But she had been, there was something wrong with the whole family dynamics, and I didn't
Mm-hmm.
know what it was. And I was discussing this with the ICU doc. And well, it turns out this child had been kidnapped.
Oh, goodness.
When I had mentioned, just something was wrong. I mean, there was just like this blank look, either the child's I mean, so I wasn't sure what it was. I mean, I didn't come up with abuse. I'm just like kind of going through it after I left the OR and talked to the family. And there's something, there was no spark, something was there. So I think, again, but that happened way, you know, even yes, the 18-year-old going into medicine, trust your instincts. You don't have to always have to speak them out, but
Mm-hmm.
just kind of keep that going. And I think the other thing was, sometimes the um, what may seem like a failure or you're not progressing isn't. It doesn't necessarily have to mean that. You just all of these experiences um, can be used, along the way, and then you can. It will just add to your, I won't say your wisdom, but yes, you can just kind of put it in. It's like, okay, this is meeting in the puzzle, and it only helps you down the line and realize that, be kind to yourself. Don't beat yourself up. If you have a problem and you didn't do something well, fess up to it, but at the same time, move on and just don't do it again. That's something I learned from the Navajo. I was hurting this poor patient with this bad posterior bleed, and oh, it was hurting. I'm getting something to translate, and they're not saying anything. I says, please just tell them I'm sorry.
Mhm.
And there's no comment. And it's like, why are you not? Because the elders only speak Navajo. I mean, they don't, it's like being in a foreign country.
Mhm.
He said, why aren't you saying anything? Just say that I'm sorry. And she says, there's no word in Navajo for I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh.
And that's what I said, and I finally got it controlled. And I remember stopping and said, well, what do you do in these cases? She says, you just don't do it again. So the point of that is when with ourselves, when we try to kind of, oh, I didn't do this right, or I didn't, make sure or do your best not to put yourself in that situation again, or not to do it again, to learn from that experience.
Yeah.
So I think, because there's a lot of times from 18 on that I was like, oh,
Yeah.
regret
Yeah.
things or feeling badly, and just learning that this goes along, and guess what? You're going to make a better decision the next time, or you're going to be able to be more supportive. So
Definitely an important life lesson. Anything else? Where are you right now? In
Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Albuquerque. Okay. And
Yeah.
then, so how long have you been there?
6 years. My
Okay.
daughter decided to get married. So I did a year stint at Kaiser Denver,
Yeah.
covering some practice. And that's where I met Phyllis. And then the doctor came back. So it's like, okay, do I go to Portland and be with Kaiser? Or my daughter was getting married in Santa Fe, and I made a number of referrals to Albuquerque um, in my time when I was at Shiprock. I mean, I would use anyone. Denver, Salt Lake, Phoenix, or Albuquerque. And they said, hey, we have a position. Why don't you come down? So
Okay.
it's like, okay, I'm staying in the West. And so here I am.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to share with me?
I can't think of anything. No, I can't think of anything.
I'm
So
so
you had asked
grateful.
before, so there were no fellowships when I was finished.
Yeah.
Probably I was closer. I was looked for ear. There was only Jack Conley's head neck fellowship in New York.
Hmm.
Uh, and I didn't want to just do cancer. It was really ear or kids. And
Hmm.
I was with Bob Rubin, and when he and Cotton and the group were developing pediatrics. So yeah, but then there I was, as I said, in the Bronx, it's trauma. In Westchester, it was burn unit, pulmonary, Bronx, and some head and neck and kids. And then Shiprock was ear and thyroid, and Albuquerque's pediatric. So I have my own little subspecialties within the different areas.
You've
So,
done it all.
or it's done me in sometimes, but anyhow.
Now, I'm so honored to have met you, and I can't wait to meet you in person.
Me too. I can't wait till we can get back to meetings.
I know. I'm going to text Phyllis later today and tell her I had the amazing opportunity to interview you, and I'll be able to share everything that we've discussed.
Anyhow, yeah, she's such a great person. So I was so glad, to meet her. I'd always, heard about her and read about her. And so that was one of the reasons. And it was exciting to be in her particular department at the
Mhm.
time.
One of the diversity leaders and champions in our specialty.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I do appreciate people who have taken the time to get involved. I guess, I've always been sort of the runner. And then you look ahead and say, okay, or look behind, look ahead, and it's like, okay, I still have a lot to do. And you look behind, and now these people are having good meetings and good practices and developments. Like, oh, okay, well, I never really got that. I'm just still climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, and there you go.
Oh my gosh, you've done so much. I just, everyone has their own passion and what they need to do. You've helped so many people and you continue to help so many people. I just think it's important for us that are in the organization to really just understand where we've come from, who's trailblazed and been before us. And that is why I was so anxious to find you.
Well, thank you. This has been fun, and it's been great to meet you. And as I said, it's so great to see so many women out there, and women who are involved in committees and organizing.
All right,
So
well, I'm going to sign off and thank you once again.
thank you so much.
All right, take care.
And thank you for your work.
Oh,
All
thank
right.
you.